I'm Gail Nancarrow from Tiaro. I was born in Gympie on the 26th of November 1942. I lived at Theebine with my family on a dairy farm until I was 16. Then I went out west as a governess, starting off at Whitewood outside Hewenden. From then I did governessing until 1965. I was outside Winton then. I had been governessing from Batuta near Birdsville up as far as Normanton. I met my husband Bill in 65 and we married, and the owner of the property, Rangelands, put a house on there for us to live in. And in 1970, after I'd had 3 children, Mrs. Patterson unfortunately passed away due to cancer. With that, Mr. Patterson up and sold the property, so we moved back to the Tiaro area, where Bill worked in the forestry. From then he stayed in the forestry, but with only in cabins out there, we moved into a home in Tiaro. We have lived here since 1974 in the home we're presently in. Unfortunately, my husband passed away in 2015. But in that time that we were together, he was very, very helpful with anyone that he could help in the town of Tiaro. Hence, myself, I love helping people. I love being out there, and if anyone needs anything done, I get great pleasure out of helping them. I was in the junior farmers in Tiaro. I was in the church functions in Tiaro until the church was removed. With all this, you get much pleasure out of helping others. And it's just wonderful now when I go to Hoy and I'm in the kitchen making sandwiches and, you know, getting ready their lunch, and I can hear them all laughing. It's just marvellous to hear a group of women with the giggles. It's just marvellous to be able to know that you have helped get them together to do that, and they all come along to play Hoy and have that laugh. And I've said on many occasions, I don't think I can go on much further, and they just say, well, just tell us when you've had enough and we'll do it. So it's really wonderful to think that people do appreciate that. Well, on the dairy farm where I was brought up, it was wonderful. Quiet, peaceful, hard work, I won't deny that. On many occasions I had to go and help Dad pick up Swede turnips, I think they called them, pick corn, cut corn. You carried it down for the stock feed, you fed the cows with it, you fed pigs, you boiled up drums of food for the pigs, potatoes and pumpkins and all sorts of things went in there. And one of the most memorable things I think I can remember about the farm is putting my cup under the spout where the milk came out when the cows were being milked and getting that cup of frothy milk. I only just told my daughter recently I'd gone back to my childhood. I'd had a frothy cup of milk because I'd shook the bottle of milk up, and when I poured it into my tea, it just tasted like it did when I was on the farm. So little things do come back to you. And another thing I remember is an elderly lady from up on what we call the hill used to walk down big baskets of food to my grandmother, something we never see done these days. People used to help one another, cook and go and, you know, give to others. It just doesn't happen anymore. In fact, most of us don't even know our own neighbours anymore. Other things on the farm were visiting the neighbours, the other children round. We would go and find yabbies and, wander around ponds and that and look at tadpoles and little fish, and it was a marvellous life. I do envy any child that has a block of dirt that can do those things, because my children have been brought up in a town. Granted, they didn't miss out on much because they were on their bikes and gone. I even heard about when the flood was on, my daughter took a mat that you blew up that you sleep on. She took that down the creek while it was in flood. So you hear all these rumours later on when they come back and tell you, and you think, oh, and you're still here? So yes, no, it's on the farm we were able to do lots of things that children of today would not know about. Mum used to have hundreds of chooks, and I know we used to sit up half the night washing those eggs and packing them away to send them away to the egg board, I guess you'd call it, and having to get up early to go down to the dairy. I was always awakened by country western music, because we played that in the dairy too. That was the beginning of the day, country western and time to get to work. I used to walk to school, probably a mile and a half across the farm, out onto the road to the Theebine School, where I did all my schooling until I went to high school. But not being a brilliant person at schoolwork, I ended up leaving and going out west as a governess with my mother's help, because my mother was born and bred outside Alpha. So she thought that was the life for me. I did try to be a nurse, but that wasn't successful either. I wasn't cut out to be a nurse. So I ended up back out west. My mother was a lady that had a huge birthmark across half of her face. The birthmark came from above her ear, right down across the bottom lip and right down over all her chest. I believe when she was younger, she had a great big grape-like thing on the back of her neck where the birthmark was, and they tried to remove that and nearly lost her. She nearly bled to death. But when you think of that, that must be nearly, or be at least 90 years ago that happened. So, had it been removed now, it would have all been okay. But in those days, I guess it was a trial and error thing. But it was quite a dark birthmark, and she got out in the community in later years. I know that when I was 12, I don't think she'd left the farm much then. She just stayed there and worked and cooked, and after I left home, she got out into pottery classes and went out bean picking on other properties, and had quite a social life, more or less, after I left home. But I guess while she had kids at home, well, she was there to look after us and do the cooking and everything that a woman has to do, plus help on the farm. She was a brilliant cook. She was a woman that had worked in refreshment rooms all her life, and I believe really enjoyed it. There wasn't anything that she couldn't put her hand to when it came to cooking. She did all the sewing, she helped on the farm. If there was a cow missing at night, it'd be nothing for Mum to have a torch and out wandering around the creeks looking for that cow. They grew beans. Mum helped with all that, growing and packing and sending away to raise that extra money that the dairy farm wasn't bringing in. In later years, when I think they'd both retired, they went out and worked on a nut farm just outside Gonalda. Gonalda, I think it is. So yes, they ended up finishing up there, and it wasn't long after that Dad had a stroke. So life on the farm came to a full stop because the farm was sold then. My father was born and bred in Theebine. His family came there I don't know, one of the first lots of settlers in that area, the Dakin family. And there was cousins. There was only the one brother, but he went into the Air Force. So round them, they all helped one another, and then there was the Baldersons that were related also somewhere down the line. And on the farm, Dad worked from sun up to sunset and even later. He would walk home in the dark, and you always knew where Dad was because you'd hear him whistling up the track. Dad whistled non-stop. Probably why we listen to the wireless so often. Yeah. When my mother sent me out west as a governess, I wasn't quite sure what I was in for. I arrived out there, and I remember I wrote home because coming from Theebine, I couldn't see the cows through the grass when I had to chase them home to be milked. The grass was so high. I got out to Whitewood, and there wasn't a blade of grass anywhere. So I wrote home and told Dad that they'd ploughed up all the countryside. And it wasn't until much later I found out that the countryside was like that because they don't have the rain for the feed to be there. But being a governess, you get up, you get yourself ready, then you get the children up, get them dressed, get their breakfast, and then you start your day in the classroom. Well, the classroom for when you're teaching one child is only from 9 until 12. Sometimes you did go a little bit into the afternoon if you hadn't filled out all the forms and, done the paperwork that had to be sent away. But the children, after school, you took them for walks. I used to walk all around the countryside out there, pushing a pram or carrying the baby. We'd go for walks every afternoon to, different places, different directions. Then you'd bring them home, be time to have their bath, give them their tea, get them to bed, and then it was time for me to have my tea and relax and put myself to bed. In those days, I wrote letters after letters. I used to do lots of letter writing. Now I do none. But that was life out west as a governess. And then I went from Whitewood, I think, to Mount Leonard at Batuta. And you've no doubt all heard about Batuta because of that Batuta Hotel. Well, I was just across the creek from there. The best creek that you could ever go swimming in. It was fantastic. You could walk out in it and it slowly got deeper. Well, I learnt to dog paddle there. I still can't swim, but at least I could dog paddle to get myself out of that water hole. So we used to go out on lots of afternoon tea trips there. You'd get in the truck and out you'd go. The men were out bringing and mustering cattle. You'd take them out their afternoon tea. It might take you an hour to find them, but you drove out there. And then out in that country, it was sandhill country. They even tried to teach me how to ride a horse. Well, that was another failure. I still can't ride a horse. But I did get a buster off one, going up a sandhill. I must have just done the wrong thing and I ended up in the sand and the horse took off. So I had to walk home. After that one, I went up outside Normanton. That was working for a relation, so it wasn't quite the same thing, but I was teaching and we had Aboriginal camps there where we had to cook the bread and stews and that for them. So it was a hands-on, full-on job too. And these paperwork for the schooling was all sent back to Brisbane. So I didn't last that long up there because it was too hot for me. I couldn't take the humidity. After that, I think a friend wrote and asked me would I go and work for a Mrs. Patterson outside Winton. She had cancer and had a little baby boy. So with that, that's where I ended up all my nursing career, not nursing, governessing career, and ended up getting married. So that was the end of my life in the bush. and then we moved back to Tiaro. While on Rangeland Station, working there as a nanny, I guess I was, nanny come a housemaid, my husband Bill was the overseer. And for entertainment out there, you travel miles, but we were lucky, only 9 miles out of Winton. And they had that big open-air theatre in Winton. We used to go there for the movies. So I went along as, you know, one of them off the station. And after probably 12 months or more, we decided that we'd get married, and that's when the boss, as we used to call him, decided to put a house on the property for us to live in. Well, in 1966, I was married in 1965, the 4th of December. The 16th of December 1966, my first was born, my William George, my Billy now. Billy is a marvellous lad when it comes to looking after others too. He thinks of others before he thinks of himself. And he's always up trying to help me now. But he's finding I'm a bit of a problem. I pile up messes, as his father used to say. You made the mess, you clean it up. I'm a great gardener. I love pruning, but I hate cleaning up the mess. So then in 1968, my daughter Judith was born. Judith was a child that needed a lot of attention, and by then I was teaching young David, the owner's son. So with that, Mrs. Patterson used to take on looking after my children. She used to be my nanny then while I'm teaching her son. So it all worked out well in the long run. And in 1970, my baby Deb was born. So it wasn't long, I think she was only a month old when Mr. Patterson said he's putting the place on the market, and what did we intend doing? We were offered other jobs out west, but then we had to think of education for the children. So we decided we'd move down to the coast, and Bill got into the forestry. So life out there was wonderful too with the kids, you know. We had pet sheep for them to play with, and we used to go for walks up in the hills. On rangelands, they have had in recent years afternoon bus trips out to rangelands, because when you go up on top of the hill and look out towards the west of the property, you'd think you were in Africa. And I had never been there when I was young. I'd been up on the hills where all the great rocks, when you look down, some of them, looked like big elephants down in the middle of it. But I'd never been over to this other part until probably 5 years ago, when I went back out there to have a look, and people arranged for us to go and have a look at rangelands. So out west as a governess, I could recommend it to anyone. It's a magnificent life. When we came to Tiaro, it was a big surprise for us after being out west, where everyone helped everyone. We arrived here, and the first year was a huge flood. We lived across the river, and 6 weeks, I think it was, we had no mail, no food, nothing come across. And it surprised us when we found out that we weren't in the boat club, so therefore no bread or milk would come across for us. So after that, every time we had to go to town, we used to ask people, did they want help? And from then on, even when we moved into our house in Tiaro, Bill was forever helping someone's garden. They'd go away, he'd be down helping. If we had fruit or veggies that were spare, he took them round to people and went and helped them. He was in the Masonic Lodge. I can't say he did a great deal for the school. I was on the P&C and I used to try and help at the school. I used to go up for the reading. Parents used to go and sit and help children read. Then I got into the church side, the Anglican Church. They used to have hoy and functions round in their hall. I went there, and a Daff Smythe and I, Daff was the one that got me into hoy. She's a fantastic lady that is nearly 90 now and still just as active. We used to do catering, take cakes and do morning teas at the Anglican Church. Used to be Church of England in Maryborough. They have it there on a Thursday morning. We used to do it there. And then while the kids were young, we started with the rural youth, which the kids loved, because I used to remember playing at these friendship nights in Theebine, all the indoor games. So we tried to get that going in Tiaro, but these things don't happen anymore. The good old days are gone and have to be forgotten. But from then on, you know, I have friends and neighbours that I help out if I can. In Tiaro at the moment, we have 2 women that desperately need help. One lives by herself in a home. She lost a daughter. This woman is 90 and has to have outside help come in. She doesn't see anyone otherwise. And I think that's so sad in a small community. We should all be out there to help. Our community centre in Tiaro should have a group that are able to go out and help these people. When someone's needed, a car needs someone to drive someone to town. I don't think Tiaro has that. We have our CWA units there, people in there that have to get people, I think it's St John's, come out and pick them up. We need a lot of help to help others in Tiaro. But in this day and age, no one seems to want to come forward to help anyone. And at the moment, I am so tied up with Tiaro Community Centre. I help with the markets, CWA, hoys twice a month, trying to fit meetings in, which I'm not getting the minutes done properly for anymore, but I've got to get on top of it and come back a bit because I love my gardening. I'm the gardener for the CWA because I refuse to pay anyone to, you know, do stuff that I'm capable of doing. Not long ago, they said we had to get someone out to wash down all the back verandas of the units, where a couple have been, probably for nearly 20 years now. And I said, I'm not getting anyone out to gurney that, I can do it myself. So I went and did it. I know I should call in others, but I enjoy doing that sort of thing, so I think I should be allowed to do it. So, yeah, you know, there are lots of things in Tiaro that I could be involved with, but there's lots of fantastic groups just battling on, trying to get people involved. But in this day and age, everyone's so busy. They say to me how lucky I am. I've got young ones in CWA. I am lucky they're young, but they also work. And while they're working, they can't be at functions helping. So in one way, it's marvellous that the young ones are getting involved, but then it's sad when they can't come and help. So, you know, CWA is another thing that we are all volunteers and we all love helping others. So I think that's about all I can tell anyone about CWA, except that I think all branches are going to need new members. We're all going to have to get people in to help us to survive. if I can help someone, that's the main thing. And as I've always taught my children, the precious thing that God gave us was the gift to be able to help others. That is my motto in life. Something that we've all been given, but we don't all accept it.